There are many useful self-improvement principles, but there is one idea that stands as the king on top of the mountain. And when mastered, it will unlock an interior power, clarity, and peace so profound that you will have no choice but to unleash your apex potential in life. So, what is this principle? Well, the answer is dignity, and it is the path to true power as a man. Now, if at first you do not gasp in excitement, I will forgive you because almost no one in the self-improvement space seems to really get the power of dignity. Summarized simply, dignity is the idea that you have inherent and unconditional worth. Now, the big challenge with teaching on dignity is that it has the tendency to sound so kind of mundane and or amorphous that it is of no real value. But by the end of this video, you're going to be wondering why dignity isn't literally the #1 topic that self-help gurus are shouting from the rooftops, because when you get how to practically apply this, extreme positive transformations to both your life and even the world at large are literally inevitable. Hi, my name is Mark Queppin, and I help men who are haunted by their unmet potential implement a lifestyle of pure devotion to their highest goals in 28 days without brute force willpower. If you want to learn more about how I do that, make sure you click the free training in the description. I've been coaching guys for over a decade, and thousands of guys have gone through my programs over the years. But without fail, every single positive transformation I have ever been a part of is always built on dignity. And without it, nothing really works. And if you are brave enough to adopt a truly dignified approach to your self-improvement, I can promise you that you will begin experiencing breakthroughs and making progress in your life like you never have before. So let's get into it, shall we? So, for context, in the last video in this series, we described the fundamental key of masculinity to be the capacity to show up to the front lines of life, i.e. the battlefield of the will, where you allow the forces of your deepest and truest desires to smash into the challenges of your circumstances. And the man who can live with pure devotion to these highest goals despite the costs is what we call a frontline man. And the frontline man is always strongly connected to his dignity. But the front lines of life can be scary, difficult, and a painful place to operate, requiring great sacrifice and discipline. And because of this, many men instead go through life as a backline man who only knows how to run away. However, I want to be clear about this, is that the backline man can still take massive action and be wildly productive in life just from an undignified place. It's just a very different thing, and frankly, it kind of sucks. And if you're an ambitious guy who gets stressed out a lot, then I can pretty much guarantee that you have a dignity issue. But more on that in a bit. But the point here is that the backline man is always a man who is disconnected from his dignity. Basically, dignity is sort of a spectrum because, we're all kind of a mix. Sometimes we're showing up on the front lines as a dignified man. Sometimes we're on the back lines as an undignified man. But the key is that really in any given specific situation, you can only have one main psychological orientation. You're either dignified or you're undignified. And my main point here is that the more fully you commit to the dignified path and bring dignity into everything you do, the better your life will become and the more freely and powerfully you'll show up. Now, I could talk about dignity for hours, but the main purpose of this video is to build a contrast between the dignified man and how he shows up in the world and the undignified man and how he shows up in the world. So in this video, we're going to cover self-image, mindset toward deficiency, driving purpose, and motivational method. So let's start breaking down this self-image piece. We'll start with the undignified man. Okay, for the undignified man, he views his personal worth to be defined by his status. Status just refers to your standing in a particular value hierarchy. So the undignified man looks at where he stands in his financial status, his social status, his sexual status, his physical status, his moral status, etc., and bases his sense of worth and goodness on that calculation. So if he has more money, he feels better about himself. But if he can't get a girlfriend, he feels worse. If he's got big muscles, he feels good about himself. But if he's short, he feels worse about himself. Like, you get the idea. And every guy obviously cares about different kinds of status in different ways. Some guys really care about being at the top of their field. Other guys care a whole lot about how hot their girl is. Other guys are primarily focused on how well they follow their religion. Other people are more like, how much do people like them? But the key takeaway here is that the undignified man has a self-image that is entirely conditional, and that without status, he has no value. This means that the psychological makeup of the undignified man is that he's like a vacuous black hole. He's empty of intrinsic worth and is constantly grasping at status. Now, on the flip side, we've got the dignified man who believes that his worth is intrinsically and unconditionally good. So instead of being defined by his current position in some status hierarchy, he sees his life, regardless of what happens in it and what he attains, as having a fundamental and unchangeable value. Now, before I go too far, I want to make it clear that the dignified man still cares about status. I mean, you kind of would have to be an idiot if you didn't. If you don't care about moral status, your social status, financial status, sexual status, etc., then you'll live a lonely, wretched, and possibly stinky existence in some gutter somewhere. But we'll explain the relationship to status in a second. The point is that with dignity, your core worth transcends your status on a deep level. This creates a situation where the dignified man has a psychology more like a radiant star of goodness burning within him, and that contrasts to that undignified man with the black hole inside of him. So that's the self-image makeup of the undignified versus the dignified man. And now let's move on to how these two different types handle the situation where they feel like they might be lacking status or they're deficient in some area of life that they care about. And this is really important because I believe that everyone, no matter what, they're going to come into a situation where they feel like they don't have enough status. And that will cause psychological pain inside of you, unless you have some kind of mental disorder that will cause pain, dignified or undignified. But the key is, how do you process that pain of not having the status that you want? For the undignified man, when he feels lacking, he operates in the narrative of, I lack status, which makes me bad. Therefore, I must feel bad about myself. Basically, he lets his lack of status psychologically define him, and he processes this externally caused psychological pain as a reflection on his interior sense of self, leading him to get down on himself and dislike himself. It's like, oh, my amount of money defines me. Oh, the amount of sex I have, it defines me. And if I don't have enough, oh, that's not good. I'm not good. I feel bad. Blah. But for the dignified man, when he's dealing with deficiency, he operates from the narrative of status doesn't make me any better or any worse, but living out of alignment with my nature of goodness causes me pain. Okay, so the critical piece here is that nature of goodness part, because when you go against the nature of a living thing, it creates pain. So, for example, all right, the nature of my finger is to bend like this, right? But if I start pushing against that nature and bending it backwards, it's going to start to hurt, and eventually it's going to break. And for a dignified man, this is kind of how he processes status deficiency. It's similar to how he processes physical injury. Yes, it's undesirable and painful, but his foundational sense of self is still fully intact and unharmed. This means that for the dignified man, even if he's lacking status, he can still be at peace in himself in his deepest core. And that is an incredibly valuable thing, because you're just going to have points in life where things don't go your way. But what if you could maintain a sense of peace and okayness with yourself during that? Be pretty amazing. So now that we have a handle on how the undignified and the dignified man manage a sense of status lack, let's talk about what his main purpose in life is. The undignified man's driving purpose in life is to earn enough status to become good enough, and to fill that underlying sense of lack within him, and basically to avoid that pain of not being good enough. So if you struggle with feeling not good enough all the time, well, then this is fundamentally an undignified perspective. When you're coming from this undignified place, life is about becoming this Hoover vacuum for status points. You know, you're looking to fill yourself with these status ornaments or trophies that you can use to decorate that painfully empty space inside of yourself. And frankly, that's kind of like trying to put stickers on a turd and make it cute. It just doesn't work. Further, for a guy in this mindset, life becomes a competition of winners and losers. This could be a competition with others for, who can get the most status, but it also holds true even if he's only competing with his own ideal in his head. Either he feels like he scores the status points and wins the right to feel good about himself, or he loses and then he has to feel bad about himself. The big and obvious problem with this is that no one's status is ever permanent. Fitness, finances, romance, heck, even one's own morality are in a constant state of flux. And just one bad day can cause it to all go up in smoke. Maybe the stock market crashes, or you get into an accident, you can't work out and maintain your muscles anymore, or, who knows? Anything could happen. And this creates an inescapable anxiety within the undignified man because there is never any guarantees that his status, and therefore sense of worth, is totally secure. This basically makes the emotional state of the undignified man a constant roller coaster, defined by however he's reading his internal scorecard at the moment. If he's winning, he feels like he's the top dog, the big boss. But if he's losing, he feels like a worthless failure. But ultimately, he's just driven by this constant grasping need to score those points. However, the dignified man has a very different life aim. For him, it's all about generating radiant congruence. His goal is to have his status reflect and honor his dignity. So he still aims for status, but it's not about achieving some specific outcome or winning. It's about letting the goodness within him shine out with proper intentionality into everything that he does. So for the dignified man, life isn't so much a competition as it is a form of creative, artistic expression. He can make good art where he aligns his status well and creates a lifestyle that reflects and honors his worth. Or he could make bad art where he sins, which is really a Jewish archery term for meaning missing the mark. So it's like he can either make that good stuff or he can make the bad stuff. But when he's making the bad stuff, he's just an artist and that was a bad draft. I missed the mark. But either way, he's still stable in his core sense of worth. But really the big thing is that it's about the expression. The dignified man, he's got good stuff inside, and all he's got to do is let it out to the best of his ability. And now we get into the really interesting stuff. And this is the question of how do these two different types of men motivate themselves? How do they generate the psychological energy to make productive sacrifices and enact the discipline required to achieve their goals? Well, the undignified man is a backline man. And that means that he can only motivate himself by running away. So what does this running away mean? Well, in one sense, it means, turning toward easy pleasure, things like substance abuse, porn, excessive scrolling, gaming, etc. And this is a very common thing for people to do when they have an undignified perspective because they just don't feel good enough and they just want to drown all that out with easy pleasure. But even guys who generally struggle with escapism like this can still get stuff done sometimes. And they do this by running from immediate consequences. So if you've ever procrastinated on studying for a test or paying a bill until you were threatened by immediate consequences, and only then could you take action, that is a backline form of productivity. Basically, you're still running away. You're just running away from the negative consequences you wish to avoid more than, doing the thing. And this kind of externally motivated action will usually only keep you from dire immediate consequences, and it will rarely produce very impressive results. However, there is actually a way for the undignified man to become extremely productive and even rise to incredible levels of success. But in order for him to do this, he must create an internal motivation that he controls. This is done by running from his own internal critic. Basically, this is a process of self-enslavement where he creates an incredibly nasty inner critic who rules through a tyrannical reign of fear. He creates this dynamic through beating himself up and being cruel to himself via his own internal self-talk. He'll call himself names, berate himself, and tell himself that if he doesn't do the right thing, then he sucks and is worthless. Sometimes he'll even go so far as to actually punish himself. And I'm not going to lie to you, this fear-based approach can work. In fact, you can even get dramatic results this way. But here's the catch. Any undignified progress you make will always be built on unstable ground. Which is why I refer to a guy who takes massive action in his life using this form of undignified self-motivation, not as a frontline man, but as a fault line man, okay? Because for this kind of guy, I call him the fault line man because things will always fall out from underneath him in some form or another. Basically, he's building his progress on a very unstable kind of ground. And to be honest, most of us have probably experienced this at some point. You get sick and tired of your own self-limiting behaviors. You get filled with self-loathing and you decide to make a change, but you use negative self-talk and coercion to do it. And maybe this works for a little while, but then the ground collapses out from underneath you and it all falls apart. So maybe you just get tired of hating on yourself and you want some relief. Boom, you abandon your productivity goals and you just tune out to watch Netflix all day. Or maybe you screw something else up in your life and someone gets mad at you. And while you're too busy beating yourself up about that thing, you stop making yourself afraid of junk food and boom, there you go. You destroy your diet and you binge on cookies or whatever. Or perhaps you never let up. You keep the pressure on and you never let your focus waver on your goal, but you're using this undignified form of fear-based motivation driven by your inner critic. Okay? Well, that's actually kind of common. You see, there are plenty of elite athletes, CEOs, celebrities, etc. out there who got their success through using this sort of dark side motivation. These are the Sith lords of self-improvement. And some popular self-help literature and, people, influencers out there, they overtly promote this sort of undignified behavior, in my opinion, to produce power. It's the idea of selling your soul. Literally, it's saying, I have no worth, which would be my soul. I'm going to give away that unconditional worth. And through that, I'll be able to generate infinite hatred for myself to improve. And then I get to feel better than everyone else if I make progress. And if you read the biographies of high performers, it's common to see this perfectionistic, obsessive, and brutally undignified and self-punishing mentality among those at the top. But the issue is when you're operating as a fault line man of self-enslavement, something is always bound to collapse. This is why you see so many famous and successful people deal with substance abuse, addiction, divorce, mental health issues, or sometimes even suicide, despite them being at the top of their field. Because at the end of the day, what people really want can't be earned with status. Because what they want is they want to feel loved, and they want to be loved for more than just their conditional ornamentation of status. They want to be loved unconditionally for who they are deep down. And status and power can numb that longing for fulfillment, but it can never actually fill that void. And the undignified pursuit of these things can lead you to the pits of hell, even if you're quote unquote, on top of the world. So clearly you should see the downsides to this undignified approach. So what do things look like on the dignified side of the fence? Well, while the backline man can only run away, the frontline man can only pursue his highest conception of goodness. Okay? Because if you're operating from a place of true dignity, then you know that you owe it to the goodness within you to aim to give yourself and the world at large your absolute best. Anything else would be a denial of your own dignity or the dignity of others. And to be clear, this doesn't mean you need to be always like grinding away like a madman or giving everyone what they want. This is because what constitutes the highest expression of goodness is always a contextual and holistic thing. So like, for example, there are going to be times when, the best thing you can do is take a day off because you're literally exhausted and you need rest. Sometimes you need to tell people to literally buzz off or even get out of your life permanently. But when you do that, it's because you actually legitimately think that is what the best thing to do is, all things considered. The key, though, is that when you're motivating yourself from a place of dignity, you're operating from a framework of giving yourself and others good gifts. All right? And the power of this dignified gift-giving perspective cannot be understated. If you've ever taken the time to pick or make out a gift for someone and really put some effort into it, simply because, you were excited, you wanted to make them happy, you wanted to give them something that would light them up, all right? If you've ever done that, then you know how pure and beautiful this energy is, and also how insanely powerful it is. Now, imagine if this was the kind of energy that powered your discipline. What if this is how you got yourself to go to the gym because you wanted to give yourself the gift of fitness? What if this is how you built your business because you wanted to give yourself the gift and your family the gift of a prosperous financial situation, and you wanted to give whoever you were serving in your work the gift of fantastic work? And what if it just excited you every single day to get up and share that goodness? Imagine how wonderful life would feel like this, because when you operate with self-dignity, not only do you get the joy of giving the gift, you're also the one receiving it. And this is how you achieve self-mastery. Okay? Basically, instead of enslaving your internal faculties and making them, a slave to the pursuit of a particular status hierarchy, self-mastery is when you organize all of your little sub-personalities, all the little parts of you that create neurochemical drive. We got like your sex drive, your social drive, your status drive, like all these different things, right? Your self-protection mechanisms, like all the little things that have a voice inside of your head. Instead of trying to dominate those and make them listen to you and force through them and use white knuckle willpower, what you're doing is you're actually caring about all of them holistically, and you're winning them over piece by piece till eventually they all serve your internal master, okay? And that would be your highest conception of goodness, or from a spiritual standpoint, I view that as the Holy Spirit running through me, through my dignity. And when I can organize myself, I train myself, I actually condition my neurobiology to operate this way in alignment, in harmony. That is the state of self-mastery. Everything is serving the master inside of you, and they're doing it because they love the master, right? The whole thing is one big internal network of love. And yeah, this is not easy to do, okay? Achieving self-mastery is something that's actually going to require a lot of pain, a lot of sacrifice, right? You're going to have to go through a lot of discomfort. But the secret motivational power that's hidden in dignity, which allows you to pull all of this off, is that your unconditional sense of self-worth means that you are always worth the sacrifice, okay? When you have dignity, it doesn't matter whether you're screwing it up or you're totally crushing it in life. When you understand that you're fundamentally good, then you have infinite justification to sacrifice for your own benefit, and you feel like you're worth it. And when you really get that, that is when you gain access to your true power. I would argue that you actually gain access to the power of God. I believe that that is what our dignity comes from, the little divine spark of God inside of us. And when we submit ourselves to this highest conception of goodness and we see it as a core element of who we are, and we surrender ourselves to it, that is when it flows through us and nothing can stop us. Now, there is a bunch of other stuff that we could talk to in relation to dignity, like how dignity changes our self-talk, how dignity affects your social interactions, like where our patterns of being undignified come from, the historical, social, and even spiritual reasons why the world seems to be against dignity, how to claim your dignity, tactics for practicing dignity, heck, even the pros and cons of being dignified, and the list goes on. But those are kind of big topics, and we got to save those for other videos, or else this video is going to get way too long. But if you want to make sure that you see these videos, then leave a comment below and let me know which ones you're most interested in hearing about next, any questions you have. And better yet, make sure you like and subscribe as well. And if you really want to make sure that you don't miss anything and you want to get your best results in relation to dignity, then you're going to want to click the link in the description for my free training. Not only will you get a dignified framework that I use to help men stop being haunted by their unmet potential, cut bad habits, and become frontline men in 28 days, all without any of that undignified negativity that I talked about. You'll also be put on our newsletter where we'll shoot you a notification whenever there's a new video posted so you don't miss a thing. And finally, if you like this video, there's a favor I would ask you. Please share this with someone who you think needs this information. I firmly believe that this concept of dignity is the most important information I've ever discovered, and I see a conscious wielding of dignity as a fundamental prerequisite for the rise of the frontline man and a dawn of a new golden era in the modern age. Plus, dignity is always way more fun with friends to share it with. So anyways, thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the front lines. Ooh yeah.